For 300,000 years, the Vex Collective has maintained perfect order across the outer spiral. They are not cruel, you understand. Their fleets move with mathematical precision. Their laws flow through the galaxy like inevitability, not imposed, but simply accepted, the way water accepts gravity. Species rise and fall at their recommendation. Worlds prosper or decline according to Vex assessment. And yet, in all that time, in 300,000 years of absolute governance, no world has ever resisted them, until Earth submitted its petition for independent economic status. On the surface, the request was nothing. A collection of 5 billion humans, a relatively young species by galactic standards, barely sapient on the timeline of the cosmos, seeking trade rights without collective intermediaries. Humans requested the right to control their own commerce. They asked for autonomy. The Council of the Vex considered this request for approximately 17 seconds. The answer was no, not harshly stated. The Vex do not deal in harshness. Their rejection was simply final, absolute, the kind of no that carries the weight of 300,000 years and the infrastructure of 15,000 star systems. The humans were informed that such independence would create regulatory complications, that their inexperience made them liabilities, that their place in the collective supervised, managed, protected was for their own good. The Council expected compliance. They had never experienced anything but compliance. What they did not expect was for humanity to simply say no. The Vex did not understand defiance. It was, from their perspective, illogical, irrational, dangerous. So they did what the Vex always did when faced with an anomaly. They moved to correct it. The message came 3 days later. Earth would submit its productive capacity to collective oversight, or Earth would be audited. A complete economic audit, every transaction, every resource allocation, every financial structure to be reviewed and calibrated for collective efficiency. For humanity, this was not a punishment. It was something worse. It was bureaucratic annihilation. The humans understood what the Vex meant. An audit was a pretense. After weeks of examination, infractions would be discovered, inefficiencies identified, corrective measures implemented. Earth would lose its manufacturing centers, its research institutions, its freedom to choose its own future. Step by step, the audit would dismantle human autonomy until nothing remained but a shell, compliant, docile, managed. The Vex had done this before, to species less resourceful, to civilizations less desperate. But Earth had one advantage the Vex had not calculated for. Her name was Dr. Sarah Chen, and she was the director of Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Array. She saw something in the astronomical data that should have been invisible, a pattern in the Vex communication network, a rhythm, a weakness in their quantum encryption so subtle that only a being without the burden of 300,000 years of institutional certainty could spot it. A human, young, brilliant, desperate, and absolutely unwilling to accept that her species had no choice. She spent 4 days awake. She barely ate. Her hands shook from stimulants and adrenaline as she worked, knowing she had perhaps one opportunity. On the 5th day, she did something that no species in the collective had ever attempted. She accessed the Vex's own communication systems and uploaded a single message. Not a demand, not a threat, just a message. A simple statement that would appear on the personal comlink of every single Vex administrator, simultaneously, across all 15,000 star systems. The message was written in mathematics, in pure logic, the Vex's own language. It said, "You do not understand us. Allow me to show you." And then it showed them. The Vex watched. They watched Dr. Chen's message unfold in their data streams like a flower blooming. A holographic history of human civilization, compressed and distilled, transmitted across the quantum lattice of their own secure network. They saw Earth, a planet with no unified government, no central authority, split across 100 nations and 1,000 competing interests. Where species of the Vex stability required perfect order, Earth thrived on chaos. They saw humanity's wars, the devastating conflicts that should have ended their species 1,000 times over. The Vex cataloged the death toll, measured, calculated, understood it rationally, and wondered how the species survived its own violence. But the Vex kept watching, because in that same message they saw something else. They saw humans building hospitals in the cities they had just destroyed. They saw scientists racing to develop medicine during plagues, working not for profit or glory, but for the simple mathematics of saving lives. They watched humans rescue strangers from burning buildings. Humans sitting with the dying, offering nothing but presents. Humans creating art, pointless, inefficient art, in the ruins of their civilizations, because beauty mattered to them even when survival did not. The Vex watched humans fail again, build on their failures, dream of futures they would never live to see, and work toward those dreams anyway, knowing they would never benefit. They watched a young human named Jonas sacrifice his life-saving medication so his sister could live. A teacher stand between a natural disaster and a classroom of children. A janitor spend decades cleaning a laboratory where scientists would make discoveries she would never understand, working in the background so others could shine. And the Vex, who had spent 300,000 years measuring worth by efficiency, by compliance, by rationality and order, finally understood what they had been facing. The Vex understood that humans did not pursue independence because it was logical. They pursued it because they were willing to sacrifice everything, order, stability, even their lives, for the right to choose their own destiny. Even if they chose poorly, even if they failed. A species that would choose freedom and failure over safety and servitude. A species that could look at the universe and decide that dignity mattered more than survival. The Vex, in all their 300,000 years of perfect governance, had never encountered anything like this. They had never encountered beings who would burn everything to the ground for a single glimpse of autonomy. Beings who would rather be human and free. The silence that followed was unlike any silence in the galaxy. 15,000 star systems held their breath. And then, one by one, the Vex Collective began to withdraw their audit. Not because humans had won in the way victory is typically understood, but because the Vex recognized something they had never recognized before. They recognized hope. In the weeks that followed, the Vex reviewed their entire governance structure. Not out of altruism, not out of sudden kindness, but because they had to understand this thing called freedom. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Earth was granted autonomy, not as a reward, but as a case study. The Vex began implementing new protocols, supervised autonomy programs for other species, room for self-determination within the bounds of collective law. It was not perfect. It was not even necessarily what humans would have hoped for, but it was something the galaxy had never seen before. Change, initiated not by a species strong enough to force it, but by a species brave enough to ask for it. And by an even greater force, a civilization powerful enough to listen. Dr. Chen returned to her post at the Deep Space Monitoring Array, and life continued. Earth still faced challenges. Humans still struggled with the weight of their own autonomy, with the terrible responsibility of choosing their own path. But they would do it on their own terms. The Vex Collective learned something in those 17 seconds of silence. They learned that 300,000 years of perfect order is no match for 5 billion beings who refuse to accept that their dreams are impossible. The Vex learned that the most dangerous species in the galaxy are not the strongest or the oldest. They are the ones who will burn everything, empires, institutions, certainty itself, for the simple astronomical hope of freedom. And for the first time, the Vex Collective understood what it truly meant to be human. Not through force, not through conquest, but through the most powerful force in the universe, the refusal to be anything other than free. If this story moved you, if you felt that spark of human pride kindled somewhere deep in your chest, subscribe for more stories of human triumph across the stars. Because in the darkness of space, humanity burns brightest, not through dominion, but through the courage to choose who we become. This has been Starbound HFY. Thank you for joining us among the stars.